Hi Janeites, and welcome back to the What the Austen podcast. Joining me today is Charlie from the Book Boy Bookstagram account. Charlie was on last year for the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire episode where we discussed who is the wealthiest Jane Austen hero. So it's so wonderful to have you back with me, Charlie. I'm so glad to have you on again.
Oh, it's great to be back. I loved it last time, so looking forward to this time.
I know, we always have so much fun. So today what we were thinking of doing is a character study on Mary Crawford, which I feel like Mary Crawford and Mansfield Park are both kind of controversial at times because people either love Mary or hate Mary. I'm definitely in the field of loving Mary, and I think, Charlie, you're a bit like me. But we thought it'd be good to kind of talk through it all, you know. Let's look at both sides. Let's look at Mary as a whole, and we'll do a deep dive on Mary.
Yeah, good plan. And yeah, no, I am Team Mary. It must be said, I do think she's great. So, but it will be really good if we look at both and, yeah, you know, put her on trial, so to speak. Let's do it.
Absolutely. So I saw some people saying that Mary Crawford's often considered the real heroine of Mansfield Park or the satisfying protagonist. And the only reason I guess she isn't is because she doesn't marry Edmund at the end. I mean, that's obviously why Fanny is the quote-unquote heroine in the terms that, like, Jane Austen sets for her heroines. Like, they have to marry the hero in the end. But I thought it was so interesting that some people consider her the satisfying protagonist. And I was like, I wonder if that's because she's more relatable to a modern audience, you know, because she's, like, so self-confident and ambitious, and she's just self-sufficient as well compared to Fanny. And I think that's, like, a lot more relatable to people nowadays.
Absolutely. It would have been interesting to know what people viewed Mary like at the time, you know, when it was first published, because I think you're right. I think Mary is quite an exciting modern character. She knows what she wants, and she doesn't have to settle for anything necessarily. She has, I think, a fortune of £20,000, was it? And, you know, she's got means, and she's happy to use them and take her own path. And I think that's really exciting. And yeah, maybe back in the day that was not exciting. Maybe people would have been like, "Ooh, Mary, stop!" And we're like, "Yes, Mary, go for it." So, yeah.
Yeah, I know. And the thing is as well, she's described as being, like, remarkably pretty. She's got lively dark eyes. Like you said, she's reasonably well off with £20,000 if we think in comparison to Miss Darcy. Miss Darcy was at £30,000, so there's not that much of a difference there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also think as well, like, I was reading the copy that I have, or one of the copies that I have, is the Wordsworth Classic Edition. And I'll tag this one actually onto my bookshop.org account, guys, like, if you want to go onto the bio, just because this one's really good because it has a lot of stuff in the introduction and also at the end where it's like, this is what this word means and things. So that's really good. But there's an introduction by a guy called Ian Littlewood, and he makes a really good point where he says, the term lively when describing Elizabeth Bennet is always positive, but when it describes Mary Crawford, it's kind of, there's a conflict between liveliness and moral impropriety, if that makes sense. Mm. And so I was like, that's actually so interesting. It's like all the things that Austen's told us are good with the other heroines, like being bold, being outspoken, being lively, is suddenly like we have to view it in a different light with Mansfield Park. Do you know what I mean? Because she's set against the quote-unquote heroine. And it's like, isn't that so funny? Like, all of those characteristics we've originally thought are, like, really good, and all the other protagonists is now the more anti-hero person.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't thought of that before, but you're so right, isn't it? I mean, Mary Crawford and Lizzy Bennet are not dissimilar, are they, really, if you think about it? If anything, Mary Crawford's better off and has more of a kind of drive to be that way. So we should be applauding her kind of more, I would say, for following what she wants to do. But I think maybe just because we're meant to see Fanny as so downtrodden and, you know, poor Fanny. So to have someone who is lively and perfect and beautiful and talented at the harp of all things, you know, what more, you know, I think it's just kind of a sort of, there's an element of jealousy there, I imagine, and that's why she's the villain on that level.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I was wondering as well, is like the difference that Elizabeth Bennet is kind of not actively seeking marriage. Like, she's kind of like jokes about it a lot, and she's like, oh, I'll die an old maid, it's fine. But the fact that Mary's like going about, like, the narrative even states, you know, like matrimony was her object, provided she could marry well. And I wonder if it's that kind of desire to marry for like self-promotion, which is we see in some of the heroines. Like, if you think some of the villains, if you think of people like Lucy Steele or Isabella Thorpe, they want to marry for self-promotion. I was like, is it the difference between marrying for self-promotion or self-preservation? Is that what makes you more of a villain? Like, if you're trying to marry well, like well off, I'm just like, maybe that's like what is like makes her more of a villainous character, because she is like, I want Tom, because Tom's the heir of the fortune.
Fair play, but but I get what you mean. But then we have to think, you know, Mrs. Bennet, she's not a villain at all, right? And her whole shtick is, my daughters need to marry well, we need to set them up. You know, I think it's just very of the time. And yeah, it's a tricky one to decide how to judge someone on a on a villainous level, like regarding that as a motivation. I would say you're correct in that. I think if you're actively going out to be a woman looking for a good match, I think that's viewed as a bit naughty. But it's the truth of the time as well, so it's just, yeah, hard one.
That's so true. And I guess the difference with Mary Crawford is she's so self-sufficient that it's, you know, she is actively looking for a hero or a husband or whatever, and she isn't relying on anyone else to help her find it. Like, she's not relying on her parents. She seems slightly estranged from like a stepdad, because he's like living with his mistress now or something. And again, that's another way that she's like totally open though. Like, she's honest about what she wants from a relationship. She wants to marry well. She wants to be rich and happy. And I don't know if that's a bad thing, being honest about it. See, I quite admire that, because I'm like, you know what? If you know what you want, you go and get that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, I mean, honesty is a virtue, right? So, so she's not hiding. She's not necessarily manipulating people. She's fully stating, this is what I like, this is what I want. And yeah, I think that's why I can't see her as a villain, because she's not. You know, she doesn't hide her intentions necessarily. She's just going for gold, and fair play.
No, and I think there's a couple of really interesting instances where we see this. One of them, I think, is really early on at the start. She is the only person that's like, Henry is a horrible flirt. If the Bertram sisters don't want their hearts broken, like, they need to avoid him because he's like terrible for it. And she loves her brother, but she knows what he's like, and she's honest about it. And she tells her sister that Mrs. Grant, she's like, you know, Henry is a nightmare for this. Like, he flirts with loads of women and loves breaking people's hearts. And I love that she's like open about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, Henry's a really interesting character in himself, but like the fact that she is fully aware of what he's like and doesn't see him through any sort of rose-tinted, oh, but he's my brother, I love him. She's like, no, he is he's a rake, right? Like, I mean, he's gonna be bad news. So, and yeah, and she's never kind of against that either, which, you know, I guess maybe that makes her a villain for not telling him to be a better person and all of that. But then would she be...
He's a spirit. Like, he can do what he wants, you know?
Exactly, but also I feel like maybe at the time, would she even be able to give that kind of guidance without him being like, well, I don't care. Like, so, yeah, it's a tough one. And they obviously love each other anyway, so...
Yeah, that's so true. And I think, you know what... for all intents and purposes, like a brother-sister relationship, he's really good to her. Like, he's always coming and like picking her up in the carriage to take her where she wants to go next. Like, I think there's a point where she's like waiting for him to come and pick her up so he'll take her back to London and everything. So I think that's really nice, actually. Like, he's always there for her, and he sticks around Mansfield a bit longer with her to keep her company. And you know, genuinely, I quite like their relationship, because I feel like they do know each other really well, and they have really good banter, and they're just like a nice brother-sister bond, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then, but maybe it's because it is quite a modern relationship. Like, again, that's the sort of banter you'd expect to have with your brother nowadays, whereas maybe back then it was a bit like, oh, you're both a bit naughty.
Yes. That's so true. Absolutely. And I think what's really interesting is, I think because they're placed in comparison to like how the people, like the family, how the Bertram family are behaving at Mansfield Park. And I feel like in terms of like the sibling relationships there, it's all like a little bit weirder. Like I feel like you've got Tom and he's like, you know, off being crazy all the time. You've got Edmund who's a bit like got something stuck up his bum half the time and is like a little bit too intense. And then you've got Mariah and Julia, who on the surface are meant to be like these perfect women who are like the most beautiful and accomplished in everything. But obviously deep down, they're quite like immature, and if they're given the opportunity, they'll be quite scandalous. And so I think it's kind of interesting. Like, I think the Bertrams in comparison, they're a bit of a mess compared to like Henry and Mary. Like, I know that they are up doing their own things and both of them aren't shy of stating what they want and going after it. But I think both of them are a lot more honest than what we see from the Bertram family.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel, I mean, are we actually kind of suggesting that maybe Julia and Mariah are the true villains of Mansfield Park? Strong. But, you know, you're right. They have a lot of repression and secrecy, and all of that is why it's such a, you know, the drama unfolds. Whereas, again, the Crawfords, I mean, at best, they're a catalyst to this, but I wouldn't say they're necessarily fully to blame. Takes two to tango, right? And, you know, they're honest from the start, and the daughters and the sons are not. So,
yeah, and I think it'd be good to chat about like the way that Edmund is as well, because I feel like Edmund is really judgy at times. Like even when Miss Crawford's at the dinner table and she's talking about, I think it's like her uncle actually, not her stepdad, who's like moved in with the mistress. And Edmund says like he was sorry to hear Miss Crawford like talk about her uncle so freely, like it didn't suit his sense of propriety. And I was just like, but then he also says like, but then he saw her smile and like be lively again, and he was just like, oh, I'll just put that to the side for a second. But he goes to Fanny and he's like, was there not something in a conversation that wasn't quite right? And it really irritates me because I'm just like, Edmund, if you think there's something not quite right there, like stick to your guns. Do you know what I mean? Like, don't be like, oh, but it's okay because she's got a nice smile and everything else is fine. That's what really irritates me about this is Mary's not fake from the start. Like, she's honest. She's happy to talk about her uncle openly. And Edmund's so judgy about it, but then he still continues to be like, oh, but I'll see the good in her. And I don't know if I can see that in a positive light because I'm just like, why expect that Mary's going to change? He's always like, oh, well, that's just like a side of her. And it's like, well, what's the issue if that's a full part of her?
Yeah, I think we've really touched on why I dislike Edmund. He's so sanctimonious about everything, right? And he's a bit, for want of a better word, bitchy, right? So he's all at this dinner table being like, oh yeah, what an awful thing to say, and then goes to talk to Fanny about it and just slates her for a while, and then goes, oh, but she's hot, basically. So, free card, great, love it. And I just feel, yeah, if anything, that shows his weakness of character rather than hers for just being lively, God forbid. And yeah, I don't know, I just think there's bits where obviously she's even very clear about what she doesn't like about him, him, being ordained and all of that. She's like, oh, I'd never really want that. She says it to his face, and she's still honest.
She's not even religious. She's like, I don't really get involved with all that stuff. She's like, I think she says like, I think clergymen are all like lazy and like don't do their job properly, or just basically like living off the state or something.
Exactly.
Like, I mean, she's pretty like honest about it.
There's that bit, isn't it, where she's like, oh, I wouldn't imagine kneeling on a cold floor every morning or something, and I was like, fair play, like it's clearly not the vibe, and if you don't want it, don't do it.
I know, and even when she finds out that is what he wants to do for a career, she isn't shy to be like, is there not something else you can do? She's like, men love to distinguish themselves, like a clergyman is nothing. Do you not have a wealthy uncle who can leave you a fortune? And I'm just like, how much more clearer can you be? Do you know what I mean? And if Edmund wasn't willing to change his mind about what he wanted to do, I don't think it was right for him to keep encouraging the situation, because like we were saying at the beginning, Mary's on the hunt for a husband, And
Yeah.
that's not uncommon for women at the time, to be looking for a husband, like whether they're doing it like, I want a wealthy husband because I want to be rich and happy, or if they're just, going to balls so that they can meet someone. They have got to find a way to marry someone, because there isn't really much else you can do. And there's like a point where she literally says, like, it says here, she was very angry with him. She thought her influence more. She had begun to think of him, she felt she had, with great regard, with almost decided intentions, but she would now meet him with his own cool feelings. It was plain that he could have no serious views, no true attachment. And that's how I feel as well. I was like, hang on a second, you can't truly want to be with me if you're sticking to your guns that you want to be a clergyman. And I guess you can see it both sides, that it's like, well, he is a man of God and he wants to stick to that. But I'm like, I also find him a bit hypocritical.
Well, it is. It's like they're both asking each other to change, and because Mary doesn't, it's like, oh, she's terrible, but he's terrible. Like, it needs to be a bit of push and shove, and there's zero of that on his side. And at least she kind of still talks to him after he's made his professional intentions clear, and she still says, like, oh, well, there's still a future if we could do this. She problem solves, or at least attempts to, and he's just like, no. So it's his problem.
I know, and you say that she doesn't change, but I feel like she softens, like, the way that she is quite a lot, like, the more time she spends with him. And so I'm like, and also she starts to be like, oh, maybe living in a small house in the country wouldn't be so bad. And she just starts to think about ways that she could make it work. I'm like, where's his flexibility? Where is he adjusting slightly?
Exactly, there's none. He's literally just like, oh, no, not doing that. And then he's like, oh, let's go and marry my weird sort of sister instead. Weird.
I know. Gosh, I mean, we don't even need to. Oh gosh, don't even need to get into that. Don't you think it's absolutely hilarious? Edmund, in my eyes, is like one of the worst heroes ever, and he managed to has like 2 women after him. I'm just like, what?
Well, I guess
something here.
Yeah, compared to his brother, at least he's not a gambling alcoholic, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Slim pickings in that area, maybe.
I know. I love that when Mary joins, she's like, oh, I'm going to go for Tom because he's, I've seen him in town and he seems like he's a good laugh and he's really flirty and, he's the heir to the fortune and all that lot. And then by the end of the novel, she's like, I hope he dies.
Yeah. Ledge.
I feel like those are one of the reasons that people like, that's awful, like, because she wishes him to be dead. But I actually think that Mary is like speaks to a part of, I think, just like human nature where people are survivors, and she's like, she isn't wrong that if Tom was to die and Edmund get the fortune, that probably would be a better scenario for the Bertram family, and it solves all of her problems, like, because Edmund would no longer become a clergyman. And I'm like, I know it's really selfish and really heinous and horrible, but I'm also like, it's very practical.
Yeah, at the end of the day, he keeps putting himself in the position to almost die by over-drinking, partying too hard. She's just being logical about the situation. And if someone parties too hard and unfortunately dies and ends up making your match more eligible, I think,
It's not like she's killing him off,
Exactly. I'd be against her if she, smacked him around the head with a rolling pin, don't get me wrong, but...
With the harp. She pushes the harp on him, crushes him.
She is always playing that harp, to be fair.
I know. I also, do you know what surprises me about Edmund is, I know Mary's like super pretty and super accomplished and she plays this half amazingly, but it's literally like within a week. It literally says in the book, like within a week he was like in love with her. I'm just like, wow, that is some quick feelings that you've generated there. I'm just like, I wonder if he was like more infatuated with her and that's why he kept trying to think of her, that she was like this perfect person for him, and the truth was that she would never be able to live up to that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like he kept trying to put aside her faults, well, what he considered her faults, but the truth was that she was never going to change that much. And I don't think we can condemn Mary for not changing for this guy who doesn't seem to like all parts of her. Like, I'm sorry, that's not her fault that he's got you know, these opinions about what he thinks is right and wrong in someone. You know, if he's that self-righteous, why didn't he pick Fanny off the offset, you know?
Exactly. God. But also, I feel the whole of her kind of being him falling in love with her instantly, it's kind of that kind of her being a siren, playing the harp, being beautiful, luring good men to bad things. Like, it's, I think that kind of fits in with her whole seductress thing, where if you read between the lines, isn't there. You know, we're seeing a sort of really skewed view of her just because she's easy to see as a villain, because she's beautiful, talented, people fall in love with her. But she doesn't really deserve it. She is just nice.
And
So,
wealthy. Like, I think sometimes that does cloud people's judgments, and I wonder if that was the same back in the day, because I think about the way that Jane Austen described Emma, where she said, you know, I'm going to take a heroine who no one but myself will much like. And it makes me wonder if, like, people really didn't like to read about wealthy, like, protagonists or heroines and things. Like, they wanted people to be, you know, in a poorer situation where they're kind of brought out of poverty, as opposed to, or not necessarily poverty, but, you know, like brought into a better situation through love, as opposed to somebody who's already well off. Like, maybe it was more difficult to see somebody who had money as righteous.
and especially a woman with money, right? A woman with agency, a woman who's not like, I need a man to save me straight away. Maybe on the wider scale, it was harder for people to look at that and be like, well, you know, why get married at all if if you're wealthy and having a great time? And Emma says that at one point, I'm fairly certain. She's like, I don't need to marry. And that must have been, yeah, quite a contentious point for a lot of people.
Yeah, or just being like, I feel like really confident and independent as a woman as well. Because if you think about the difference between Mary, how she's like this really active person, like she says, nothing ever fatigues me but doing what I do not like. And I'm just like, that is such a brilliant line. And, you know, she never wants like Edmund to hold her up, and she's always like, can we walk a bit further, please? Because I'm not tired yet. I want to keep walking. As opposed to Fanny, who's always like, I need to sit down for a bit. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I do.
Like, Mary's so active and has so much energy, and that's just like, I don't know. What are we meant to see? That is that's like a bad thing. I don't know.
Again, it draws it back to sort of like, Lizzy Bennet goes on walks. How amazing! How great! Awesome! And it's like, Mary Crawford goes on walks. Bad girl. Sit down. It's weird. It is a complete. Yeah, it's just a strange shift of what we are meant to see as bad behaviour, compared to all of her other works, really. Like, yeah, very strange how Mary Crawford is responsible for so much hatred, bless her.
I would love to know, like, what Jane Austen thought of Mary Crawford, like, because it is so different, like, the way that she doesn't win out. And I think it's that she says, like, there's a line you can cross, and I think she thinks that Mary crosses the line where it's not being lively and outspoken in a way that's acceptable. It's like, as soon as you cross the line, like saying, like, I hope that Tom dies, or being accepting of her brother kind of flirting with all these women. Like, maybe she does just cross slightly over a line that there's no coming back from. It pushes her into the realms of people like Lucy Steele or Isabella Thorpe.
Yeah, no, you're correct. I think it must be, yeah, that sort of, she's slightly too lively. God forbid. But yeah, no, I think it is. It's that kind of, she doesn't have the pure white morals backing up her other good attributes. So overall, yeah, that's not,
absolutely,
not giving her a way out.
No. And also, she's not opposed to being a part of the play. Like, Lovers' Vows is obviously like a bit controversial, and she's just like, yeah, I'd love to be a part of it. I think just because she wants to have a good time, she's just up for anything. And so are most of the other ones as well. But what I find really interesting about this is she's like, yes, I want to do the play. And she's even willing to do it with a stranger. Like, she feels a little bit weird about it. She's like, well, I'm not 100% comfortable about this, but I will do it if I have to. In Edmund's being like on his high horse about why they shouldn't do the play. Like, it's the worst thing ever. It's honestly going around saying all of this. Then as soon as Mary Crawford's like going to do an intimate scene with a stranger, he's like, I'll step in. I'll do an intimate scene with you, Mary. Don't you worry.
Exactly, and again, I think a lot of his talking about it is behind everyone's back again. He's quite... he's not a nice guy. And such a hypocrite. And the fact that Fanny doesn't kind of address this later on, like, surely she should be like, actually, Edmund's a bit of an asshole.
She says the funniest thing. She's like, could it be possible Edmund's so inconsistent? And I'm like, yes, it could, Fanny. He's continually inconsistent.
Has been from
That's the only thing he's consistent about. His inconsistency.
That's like his main character trait.
Do you know what really blows my mind about the fact, like, Fanny's view on Edmund doing the play is she says, alas, it was all Miss Crawford's doing. And this brings me to something that honestly really bothers me. I genuinely think the only reason Mary Crawford's villain is because Fanny thinks she's a villain.
100%.
Like, I genuinely think it's all through Fanny's eyes.
Is that, like, what sort of reasoning is that? Oh, it's all Miss Crawford's doing. What, because she said yes and everyone else did too?
And Edmund was saying no, but then suddenly he's like, oh yes, if I get the chance to, snog Mary Crawford,
yeah.
I'll do it.
Exactly. God, Miss Crawford, how dare you be so sexy?
This is the thing, I don't quite understand how that's possibly Mary Crawford's fault that Edmund's done it. And Mary's not stealing Edmund, because actually at the start of the book she makes a point of finding out whether or not Fanny's out in society. And she has this full-on debate with Edmund and Tom where they're talking about what has Fanny been to balls? Does she, like, socialise with people outside? And they come to the conclusion that Fanny isn't out. And so Mary couldn't be more oblivious to Fanny having, like, a potential attachment to Edmund, because as far as she's aware, Fanny kind of falls with, I don't even know, like a younger child, if that makes sense. Like someone who's not even hit marriage market age or something, or potentially will never be in the marriage market because she'll be a companion for life. And I'm like, she's not in any way being malicious about this. Like, she's not thinking, I can see that Fanny likes Edmund, I'll take Edmund away. She is completely oblivious to that.
Yeah, and we have to address the fact that, I mean, they've grown up together as kids, right? And he calls her sister, like, quite a few times. Like, if I was Mary, I'd be like, okay, clearly not going to happen between them, right? Like, it doesn't really inspire, like, oh yeah, I can see they're in love with each other. You think, oh, they've got, like, a family love, because they play together, they were young children together, there's a whole brother-sister thing, like... It really wasn't the sexy vibes.
And I feel like Mary makes an effort to be friends with Fanny because she sees that Edmund and Fanny themselves are close friends. Like, I think she's like, oh, I want to make sure that Edmund knows that I'm, friendly with Fanny. Like, if Fanny's important to Edmund, I'll get to know her and be kind to her. And I mean, I'll get on to like a few instances later where I think it really stands out that Fanny is that Mary is kind to Fanny, and Fanny just can't. Like, she just can't see it. And Fanny makes a point of saying she is surprised at how much time Edmund can spend with Miss Crawford and not see the kind of fault which she had already observed and for which she was almost always reminded by something of the same nature whenever she was in her company. What has she possibly done that's made you feel this way? Like, I get it because she's in love with Edmund and she's jealous.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what I mean? Like, this is the thing that I'm like, I really struggle to understand how people can see Mary as a villain, because I'm like, what has she possibly done that's villainous? Like, Fanny, yes, sees her as a villain, which I can kind of understand, because if somebody's like flirting with the person that you like you would be a bit like, like, are you lost? Like, what are you doing? Like, you would be annoyed with them naturally just because you're jealous. But I'm like, I feel like a lot of people don't see it that way, and it really surprises me.
Yeah, no, same. Especially if we have to consider some people are really not nice to Fanny, right? Like, most of her family are horrible to her, and Mary's kind, and she's still like, Mary's the worst. Not her aunt, who's like absolutely the worst, or I mean, she obviously touches on those things, but they are actively hostile to her, and Mary's like, oh, let's be friends, and she's like, ugh, Why would I be friends with you?
I know. Like, there's a time when Fanny's walking down by the parsonage where Mary's staying, and Mary invites her in. She's like, I know you've not yet heard me play the harp. Like, I'll play the harp for you. We'll have coffee together. Edmund's not even there. So you can't even say that she's only friends with Fanny for this motive. Like, I genuinely think she enjoys spending time with her.
Yeah. Surprisingly.
They do that for some reason. They spend all this time together. And even when she takes her horse, when she comes back, she's like, I know she doesn't apologize, but she says, selfishness can't be cured, it's just what it is. But she's not like Mrs. Norris, who'd be like, why do you think you're entitled to a horse anyway, Fanny? Go away. Do you know what I mean? It's different, isn't it?
Exactly, and that's like, if someone said that to me, I'd be like, fair play. Like, it's a bit of banter, right? It's like, oh, I went out on your horse. It's not the end of the world, Fanny. just get a hobby.
Yeah, right. If anything, I feel like, again, that's more on Edmund, because he made such a point that Fanny needs to go on these go on these horse rides and walking and stuff for her health or whatever. And I'm like, he was taking Mary Crawford out. If it was so important to him, he could have been like, gosh, Mary, look at the time. We better be getting back for Fanny.
Yeah, but shockingly, he didn't. It's almost like all of it's his fault. But he is, like, again, how is she a seductress when all she's doing is like, oh, we'll go on a horse ride? And yet he is the one who's fully aware there's other plans, other things in place, which are all being broken, and Fanny will be upset. He should be fully aware of all that. He is aware of all of that. And yet we're being told that Mary's bad for it. Why?
I know. It's actually making me more frustrated about the whole thing, because I'm like, just like, why are we here to blame Mary? Mary's just trying to live a life. She's been honest the whole way through. She's never lied about what she wants from a husband. And a lot of the other villains do. Think of Lucy Steele. Like, Lucy Steele is all about Edward, and then suddenly marries his brother.
Yeah, like out the blue. Legend.
You couldn't get more secretive or deceitful than that. Or
Isabella Thorpe. So deceitful. So planning everything. Like, I mean, that is villain behaviour. Mary just likes for harp, Why are we holding it against her?
And she's literally just like, I want to marry somebody rich and I want to be happy. Mm-hmm. And then Edmund's surprised that she's not satisfied with him being a clergyman. Like...
And she's not religious, so she can't even get on with that, So, like, why would you be happy with that? Fair. It's just...
And I feel like at that point, Edmund should have been like, she's not right for me, because if the church is so important to me, I need to be with somebody who shares the same values and morals as me. And I feel like maybe on Mary Crawford's side, she should have been like, if he wants to join the church and stuff, that's not really the life I'm looking for. But I'm like...
But I feel like she did say that, right? She was literally like, this is not the life I want. So, is there a chance of changing? And he's like, no, but I'll be vague about it and string you along. And so,
it's why she gets so upset.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think she did like him a lot. Otherwise, why would she not just go for the rich brother? If she just wanted money, you'd just go for the rich brother. Done. Simple. She obviously did like him, found him charming, found him engaging, somehow. And and then, she's genuinely upset because he's a hypocrite. So, I don't know.
And he follows her to London. And he's still up until the end. I feel like at that point, hasn't he even been ordained at that point? And he's still... Is he not? He's still not been ordained at that point.
I don't think
so. He's like really close to it, like literally a couple of weeks from it, and he still goes to London to see her in that situation.
Like a
I'm just like, if he wasn't willing to change, why keep doing it? So to me, that's worse.
Yeah, way worse.
I think so. And then I also think about how weird he is about the uncle situation, but surely what's worse is the fact that her uncle lives with his mistress and has pretty much abandoned her aunt. Like, surely that's the worst. Not that Mary's talking about it.
Exactly. It's. I guess it must be sort of like a manners thing. Like, you shouldn't talk about things which are happening in your family which are a bit dodge. But at the end of the day, So much. I mean, they talk about his brother all the time, the gambling, alcoholic, psycho. Surely that's just as bad as adultery. Like, I don't know.
They could have done with talking a bit more in that family in general, considering how everything turned out.
Stuff, yeah. They're all repressed and keep running off with people and breaking their own engagements. Like,
I know. I love that Mary's so honest about Rushworth as well. She's like, it's a real great catch for Mariah, but he's a bit of a buffoon. She's literally just like, he's a bit of an idiot, though, let's be honest.
Yeah, but I mean, if anything, what a great husband to get. He, like, when we did our wealth one, wasn't he super rich? Super rich and stupid. Yes. Win.
This is the thing. And I feel like she also said, like, Mary says, I'm not sure if Mariah will be able to stick it out, because she's like, I feel like she's got a bit of a wandering eye. She's a little bit more fun and out there than the life he's going to provide. And she was a little bit like, I'm not sure if this is actually gonna work out the way that she thinks. Like, I hope it does, because he's a great catch, but I'm not 100% sure that it will. And so she has got a lot of foresight and a lot of, I don't know, she's quite good at sussing people out.
Yeah, I think she's definitely got a good judge of character generally, which again is interesting that she's a villain in people's eyes, because that's a very heroine trait, right? Like, they're meant to be the people who suss people out properly and categorize them correctly, and Mary's right the whole way through. Yeah.
Gosh. And I feel like there's a scene that, for me, really, I think just as like the nail in the coffin that Mary's not a villain. I don't understand why Fanny doesn't see this in a better perspective, but it's basically when Mrs. Norris is being really cruel to Fanny. And there's a scene that it said, Miss Crawford looking for a moment with astonished eyes at Mrs. Norris, and then at Fanny, whose tears were beginning to show themselves, immediately said with some keenness, I do not like my situation. This place is too hot for me, and moved away her chair to the opposite side of the table close to Fanny, saying to her in a kind of low whisper as she placed herself, My dear Mrs. Price, this is a cross evening. Everybody is cross and teasing. Do not let us mind them, and with pointed attention continue to talk to her and endeavour to raise her spirits in spite of being out of spirits herself. And it says that Fanny didn't love Miss Crawford, but she felt very blessed to have this present kindness.
Oh God, that's excellent.
Kindness. This is like the only kindness. I think this is the only true kindness that she's seen. Edmund makes too much of a fuss when he tells Mrs. Norris off, that he's like, why have you been getting Fanny picking roses and everything? But Mary does it in such a subtle way where she's just like, don't worry about it, Everybody's cross. I'm here for you, Fanny. Let's talk about your brother who's off at sea. Let's talk about something else. Yeah. Why on earth would Mary need to do that for Fanny? Who's Fanny, really?
Exactly.
Mary Crawford.
No one. Exactly, like the sort of sister of a man she kind of fancies. Like, she really does go out of her way to be really sweet. And yeah, I can't see why people read that and just be like, yeah, what a bitch.
And also, I feel like Mary's putting herself on the line. Like, I know Mrs. Norris isn't like massively up there and standing and stuff, but she's definitely higher up than Fanny, and so she's willing to kind of shun Mrs. Norris to be like, Fanny, are you okay? Like, I can't believe she's astonished. Like, she is genuinely shocked at how bad they treat Fanny. And Henry's exactly the same. Like, he makes a point of saying, I want to take Fanny out of this situation. This family are horrible. Both of them say that. And I'm just like, I don't see how... I honestly see the Bertrams as the villains. I think they're all problematic.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. I think Edmund's the main villain. Throwing it out there. The villain got the girl.
Sorry, go on.
Oh no, sorry. It's just a weird dynamic generally. They're horrible to her. They took her in really begrudgingly, at best. And at the end, she's like, well, they're family, right? And it's just like, not really. Like, just horrible. And you had the chance to marry Henry, who was at least, vivacious out there, wanted to improve himself, and even said so, and was like, I would change for you. And I don't know. It's bizarre to me.
I was Fanny, I would have picked, I mean, I think I've said this before, but I would have picked Henry. I genuinely would have. I would have been like, this family do not care about me. I need to remove myself because I'm slightly obsessed with them all.
And they're slightly your brother.
And I've somehow fallen in love with my sibling. Like that is, you've got to remove yourself. And you've been offered marriage from a guy who's wealthy, like you said, willing to change for you. He actively wants to remove you from a situation that he sees bad. And he wants to give you the best in the world. Like, again, terrible person. So another villain.
And also what I find so weird is like he's fully willing to be like, look, I'm a bit bad, but I really take what you say into account and I really value your input. Like, when Fanny talks to him, he's like, I will do this and all. And, like, he obviously does care about her opinions on things, which no one else in this whole book does, apart from possibly even Mary. So, why is he a villain as well? The villains are just nicer people. I just don't really get it.
Right. I feel like they're just normal people, just being like, there's something weird about this whole setup at Mansfield.
It's a cult.
Like, we want better for you, Fanny.
It's very odd. Yeah, and I just... family shouldn't be that way. Like, I don't know. It's all just very out of touch, and you're right. I think Mary and Henry are quite normal people in a lot of ways, and their villainy is that they're outspoken and possibly not always morally correct, but I would say they're less morally corrupt than all of the rest of the family put together. So
yeah, I think so as well. I know a lot of people say that, like, part of Mary's villainness, if there is any, is that when Henry says that he wants to start like pursuing Fanny, this is before he's fallen in love with her. She says like, she says like, I don't want you to make Fanny unhappy. Like, she's come so far, like she's grown a lot since, I think it's like autumn or spring or whatever. She's like, she's a really good person. I like her a lot. I don't want you to hurt her. All of which is very nice towards Fanny. But a lot of people say she doesn't go far enough, like knowing what her brother's like. She doesn't say, no, don't touch Fanny, don't go for Fanny. But I'm literally just like, I don't know what harm it would do Fanny to have Henry flirting with her a little bit. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm a bit like, if Fanny's not interested, she's not interested, that's fine. But like I said, as far as Mary's concerned, Fanny's not even out. She's not even being around anybody. Yeah, what harm is it if Henry wants to flirt with her?
Exactly, and she still said, don't hurt her. That's all you can do. What are you going to do? Staple him into a different room so he can't ever go near her? Like, you said, don't upset her. What else can you do? It's a warning, and that's, yeah. If anything, that just shows how much nicer she is to Fanny again.
Right. She says at the start about the Bertram sisters, he's like, look, if they don't want their heart broken, they need to stay away from him. But she actually goes much further when it comes to Fanny, and she says, look, Fanny's a really nice person, don't want you hurting her. She's come very far, like she's much grown since whatever time she's grown from. And she sings her praises. And I just think she goes a lot further for her. I genuinely think she really does care about Fanny. I can't see this evilness, like evil intent towards Fanny at all. I don't think she has any of that. I think Fanny thinks she does. I think Fanny is so jealous that she creates this villain in Mary.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's misplaced anger, which should be directed against her whole family, and especially Edmund for being such a hypocrite. It's just weird. She's a perfect scapegoat, right? Just pretty and talented, and Edmund likes her, so she must be bad.
I know. I feel like this is like the perfect example of why you shouldn't jump down like on other women for for the faults of men. Like, don't do it.
Edmund doesn't deserve this for a start. Like, he's not good enough to deserve any of this attention from either of them. And then for Fanny to beat down Mary for being a genuinely supportive and kind person in a whole sea of people who are evil. I don't know. It's not my vibe.
I know. I don't see it. So that was one thing that I saw, because I was like trying to find like what is it that people see her as a villain for. And then obviously there's the Tom's death where she kind of says, I kind of wish he would die. And yeah, that is pretty bad. I think that's probably the worst thing that she says. I mean, are we going to condemn her for saying like one pretty bad thing?
Austen cancel culture.
You wish someone's death, it's done. That is the line. That's Austen's line. She's like, look, wishing people dead is just not right.
It's not the vibe. I mean, granted, it's not ideal, but as we explored earlier, it would make life better for everyone else.
I think what's wrong again is that she voices it. Yeah. That's the issue.
She should have written it in a dainty note and left it somewhere by mistake, and then it would have been more forgivable.
A bit of manifestation. Wouldn't it be lovely if Tom was to die?
Well, would have been good.
Well, like we're saying this, I mean, I know it's terrible to think about, but people do have bad thoughts at times. It happens. Are you telling me that Mr. Darcy wasn't there just like, it'd be quite good if Wickham was to pop his clogs? That would really save me a lot of trouble.
Like, routinely, I'm sure he was super into the idea of Wickham popping his clogs. Colonel Brandon probably wanted Willoughby to fall down a ditch. It's fine, Like, it's human nature.
Which... Eleanor probably wanted Willoughby to fall down a ditch after what he did to Marianne.
Yeah. He wasn't a popular lad, to be fair, by the end.
Not at the end. Not at the end. He was not. And then there was another one. There was one more point that I've seen kind of people saying this is potentially a reason why Mary might be a villain. And that was that in her letter at the end where she's talking about, the fact that Henry runs off with Mariah, is that she says, this is Mariah's fault, not Henry's. Like, Mariah's drawn him in. And I was like, I can kind of see that, because that's kind of saying what we're saying, that really you shouldn't jump down the woman's throat doing it. But then I thought about it on another stance, and I thought, Henry's single, not getting any attention back from Fanny, even though he's tried a lot. Like, I know he has feelings for Fanny, but he's not getting anything back from her whatsoever. And he's potentially could end up, like, he goes to Mariah and she's interested in it. Versus Mariah, who's got a husband in a situation in life, and she goes with Henry. Yeah. Like, I don't know. For me, I feel like Henry's the lesser of the two evils. He's not like, he's like, you need to come and, sleep with me and run away from your husband of, the great fortune and all of this lot. Like, Mariah's set up in a position, if she wasn't happy with it, she could have been like, Mr. Rushworth, this guy is trying to get on with me. Like, let's boot him out. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And I can see Mariah.
Yeah, I think, it takes two to tango, right? So, but arguably, as you say, she is already married. She is in a great life position, and she's throwing it all away because, she's a bit bored? I guess on one part, Henry going straight back to her after flirting with Fanny, I guess that does show that he is inconstant in his affections too, but maybe he just wants a bit of fun. But I guess that's him being a villain.
He did try with Fanny though. Like, he even went and visited her with her family, because Fanny was staying with her family, like in that little house, and he went and sat with them and stayed with them. Like, why would he do that if he didn't have to? That's quite
a big thing.
Put himself out there quite a bit.
Yeah,
I think so. Like, it's not a fancy house he's going to. Like, he's really slugging it with them. And so I think even Fanny says, like, wow, I can't believe he's come all this way.
Yeah.
And again, he has no idea that she's interested in Edmund. Nobody knows that. So
exactly.
He keeps trying. He's getting absolutely nothing back.
So then he moves on. Fair play. And also, we have to consider that, she... The problem with her is that he tries really hard, and she's like, no. But, there was still that flirtation there. He was still... I think she does flirt with him a little bit occasionally. Like, not on purpose, but I don't know. I don't think it's a clear-cut kind of, he's coming on to me and I don't like him. It's a kind of, she likes the attention a little bit, maybe.
Yeah. I think potentially. I think why not as well?
Yeah.
Like, I don't have anything against Fanny feeling like it's nice to be, looked at and somebody taking interest in what you have to say and what you're doing. I think that's very nice considering what she's had to deal with the whole life. The only attention Edmund gives her is literally when he wants to ask her advice of what she thinks of Mary.
Yeah, which is usually bitching about someone else or being horrible about Mary. That's their main interaction throughout the whole book.
And I'm just like, that would frustrate me more. Not Mary being nice to me, what would frustrate me is they kept coming to me asking for my advice, but then didn't listen to anything I said. Because Fanny's like, well, I think there's something a bit up with Mary. Yeah, I don't think she's interested in the church. And I don't think she's interested in marrying a clergyman. And Edmund's like, oh yeah, she says some funny things at times.
Silly Mary. Silly hot Mary. She loves the church, really.
Yeah, like, this is what I mean. I feel like he makes weird allowances. It's just super strange. And I think that's on him. I really do. I genuinely do think it's on him. But then also she kind of says it's Fanny's fault for not marrying Henry. And I can't quite see that because I'm like, well, if I was Fanny, I would have done it myself. But I'm like, I don't know if I can blame Fanny for not doing it because nobody realised that Fanny already had feelings for someone else.
In fact, I think maybe Mary's frustration stems from the fact that she knew that Fanny would improve her brother and stop him being a flirty heartbreaker. And she couldn't understand why her friend, Fanny, being operative word here, who she's constantly kind to, and she loves her brother, she loves Fanny, it would be a really nice match. And I think the frustration is like, well, why did this happen? And now he's gone back to his old ways. So, yeah, I don't blame her for saying that. I mean, it's not great, obviously, and Fanny should obviously be able to choose who she wants to marry, but it's something said out of frustration, again, and she's always open and says what she feels, and there you go.
And I think Edmund makes a point of saying as well, like, you and Mary Crawford are really good friends, so for Mary, she's really excited about this match because she actually wants you to marry her brother because she actually really likes you as a person. She thinks you're going to be great for Henry. She wants that whole thing to work out. So I don't even know if it's just, I think it is like frustration that she's like, oh, that could have been such a great match, and now look at the mess we're all in.
Like, if that could have been a really good Solval, all would have been great, basically, and it didn't work out, and yeah, she's voicing a frustration, like any human would. What a villain.
And on top of that, it ruins her. She's got no chance with Edmund now. That's completely out the window. There would be no scenario where they could then be together, I don't think.
Exactly. It's like genuinely from the goodness in her heart that she wants Fanny to be happy, her brother to be happy. She wants other people to be happy. Which isn't very villainous behaviour, in my opinion.
No, she's like really set on people making good matches and like being happy in marriage. And she obviously is really against people bringing in mistresses. She's like, gosh, I don't want that happening to me or my friends. That's terrible. And to be perfectly honest with you, I've not got anything against Sir Alternate Uncle for bringing his mistress into the house. You know what? Why not? Yeah, you tell people what he's like.
Yeah, exactly. And also, again, surely then Maria, who is becoming a mistress to Henry, effectively, right? That makes her the villain. And we're all just kind of going to brush that under and be like, oh, Maria got led astray by Henry. Not really. Like, it's an active participant. Like,
I think so, because she was given an out to marry Henry as well. She could have married, well, I don't know if he would have actually offered to Maria, but her dad gave her the out, didn't he? He said, like, you don't have to marry Rushworth if you don't want to. Like, he is a bit of a buffoon. Everybody knows it. Like, if you want to wait for someone else, I'm happy to call off the engagement, which I think is really big thing. That's
massive. I mean, you could never speak to Rushworth ever again. He's clearly a man of huge fortune and standing. He may be an idiot, but, like, imagine you're cutting off yourself from all that society by breaking that engagement. And he still offered to do that, even though, you know, I know he's not like the nicest guy ever, but, you know, he'd do that for his daughter. And she was like, it's fine. It's just mad to me.
She's like, I'm happy with Rushworth. But then also like tries to get it on with Henry during Lover's Vows.
Which is like, what, 2 weeks later? Like,
no, exactly. This is what I mean. I think it's quite clear that she's got feelings for Henry. Fanny says to Edmund, she's like, look, I think Henry, Julia, Maria, there's like something all going on there. It's all a bit of a mess. And Edmund's just like, oh, whatever, I'm obsessed with Mary right now.
Whatever, let's talk about me.
And then later's like, you got it right, Fanny. Henry and Mary, both villains all along.
The worst people we've ever met. They're so kind.
It's like, I wish they'd all never come to you know, Mansfield Park. And it's like, yeah, I bet. I mean, not like you were all having such a great time prior to
Exactly. It's not like you're all on the brink of a mental collapse anyway. Like, your brother's going to drink himself to death. Mariah's going to leave her husband regardless. Let's be honest. It's, cursed times.
I know. I genuinely think it. But so I really struggle to change my view on Mary. I really can't see her as a villain. I really like her. I think I think she stands for everything that Austen so far, like in her books, has told her as good qualities. And so I really struggle to see her in reverse. And Jane Austen also makes a point of saying, being reserved can be detrimental. And Fanny's really
Yeah,
reserved.
so reserved. I mean, as awful as I say, Fanny lets people walk all over her because she doesn't ever speak up and all of that. And that's something that Henry could have potentially helped her with and made her more outgoing, made her have more confidence in herself. And just, she has good attributes and she needs to push them out there. And yeah, I always find it really weird when people are like, yeah, Fanny's like so relatable and I love her. And I'm like, but she's letting herself be a victim in a lot of ways.
Can we help? Can we help you?
You need a hug. Because like, if you relate to that, like, I just feel it's not a good thing to be confident about. But,
Yeah, I think it's one thing being kind of like of a shyer
oh
disposition, and
yeah,
I can totally get that. But it's letting people just really walk all over you. I heard someone say that maybe it's like that she can't do anything about it because she owes the family so much. But I'm like, but that doesn't stand when Henry proposes. Like, I get marrying for love, but Fanny really doesn't have that many options in life, And I'm just like, I think I would have taken a life with Henry, with money and everything, and my friend
yeah.
Mary. Not that she considers her.
We could listen to harp together, have coffee, and I'd hate every moment of her for some reason. She's so nice.
I know, it's so bad. I think in the end, though, Jane Austen doesn't really punish Mary because she says, Mary recovered from it, and I think eventually, there is a sense that Mary would go on to find somebody else. I don't see why not. She's got all the
Yeah.
attributes to find somebody. And so I think that's good. Like, she's not like totally like shunned and condemned.
No.
And often the villains aren't in Austen's stuff. I don't think Jane Austen it is as simple as saying this is good and this is bad. I think she's like, look, it doesn't matter if you're good or bad.
Yeah.
Like, it's human nature, and sometimes the people that are deceitful or cunning are better off sometimes, or they just do well. Like, look at Lucy Steele.
Love Lucy Steele. I mean, look at Willoughby even. Marrying for money, just to keep his big house, bosh, done. I mean, yeah, he may not be happy about it, but it didn't turn out badly, did it? Like, so...
No, exactly. It turned out worse for people that he got involved with. Look at poor Eliza.
Eliza had a terrible time.
Like, child out of wedlock and all sorts, yeah. I think, and I'm glad that Mary doesn't get like super punished for it. And then obviously Edmund, like a week later, is suddenly all about Fanny.
Yeah.
I think he's so fickle, honestly. It really bothers
It's awful.
me.
And the thing that really bothers me most about the end is like 3 pages from the end, he's like, oh, my sister Fanny. And then they get married, and I'm like, no, stop calling her sister. Like, so close. Like, I get it if it started at the beginning and then resolved, but yeah, he obviously did not think of her as wife material until suddenly he just sat down and was like, yeah, well, she's alright. Like, it's just odd to me.
Can you imagine if you were Mary Crawford finding out the fact that Edmund marries Fanny?
You just be like, Christ.
What?
That is your sister, sir.
I feel like I dodged a bullet with this family.
At that point, she's probably in London, married to someone really cool, going to parties. She probably got the best ending for her in the end. We just didn't get to read it, but...
Yeah, I think so. I don't think how she ever could have been happy with Edmund. I don't think he ever would have been satisfied with her. Doesn't matter what she never would have been good enough.
Exactly.
And I think that's why he's like so all over Fanny, because he can just be like, oh, Fanny needs help all the time. Fanny's so ill and unhealthy. You know what I mean? It's like different. Whereas Mary was always like, I don't need your arm. I can walk on my own.
And I think Fanny is easily guided by him. He could easily just be like, Fanny, you need to dress like this. Fanny, you need to do that. And she'd be like, oh, okay. Whereas Mary would be like, no. So what basically he wants is someone to just follow his every idea.
Yeah, I think so. And Mary would never do that. And that's the thing. And I think, again, like we were saying at the start, that is what I think makes her a more enjoyable character for a modern audience, because we prefer the characters that are a little bit more outspoken or self-sufficient and will like stand up for themselves and don't need this constant support from a man. Because like you said, that's what we see from Elizabeth Bennet. Mary Crawford is Elizabeth Bennet, just with money.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I cannot see a difference between them. They're both kind, vivacious young women.
Elizabeth's judgy.
Yeah,
as well. I can genuinely imagine her being like, I think it'd be good.
Yeah, exactly. And everyone would be like, yeah, Lizzy, great, you're finally... Whereas Mary does it, and everyone's like, no.
You voice your opinion, Lizzy.
Go, Lizzy! Mary does it, and it's like, send her to the gallows. She's the worst.
Full-on villain. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Bring out Fanny, the angel.
The angel who can't walk more than 4 paces without a rest.
I know. Oh my gosh, like I can't even get into Fanny's whole health situations where she can't walk or do anything like that.
She probably has scurvy, to be fair.
So She's definitely got something going because I don't quite understand what the issue is. And I can never get over how like intense Edmund is about it, where he's like, she was picking roses. Oh my god, like it's like
she wasn't doing a marathon, was she? Like mad.
I know. Oh, so funny. Is there anything else you want to add about Mary Crawford then?
I mean, my general takeaway for it is that she's clearly one of the best heroines, and Fanny is not. So it should have been called Mary Crawford, the novel. Just called Mary.
Oh my gosh, literally, yeah. I can definitely see that. See, it's not changed my opinion doing any of this research. I thought maybe I'd come to it and be like, oh yeah, just do some controversial stuff, feel a bit weird about it, but I just can't. No. I really can't. And maybe it doesn't help that I'm not a massive fan of Fanny either.
No, same.
But I have always seen Fanny's jealousy towards Mary.
Yeah. It's interesting, actually, because when I last reread it, last year, and I liked Fanny more than I had previously, because maybe I'm just getting older and more like, oh, poor Fanny. But you're right, I think I hadn't really picked up on this extreme kind of framing that she does, and I think she is manipulative. I genuinely think that she manipulates the reader by being like, Mary is awful, and there is no evidence, as we've discussed. We've gone through it all. Mary, if anything, is quite a caring and nice young woman. That's it. Fanny's the villain.
It was the Fanny. It was Fanny. I know this is literally me and my Harry Potter episode. Like Fanny is Slytherin. Okay,
100%.
I'm just telling you, she's got that. She's cunning.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, not always a bad thing, but I'm telling you, she's got this jealousy and this cunning.
This poor me, I can't walk vibe.
I know. I kind of love that when she's like that, though. Then Edmund's just like, okay, then bye.
Yeah.
She's like, I can't believe he's left me.
Why would he ever leave me? I'm so entertaining to be with.
That's so funny. And then Mary's just like, I can't sit around all day. I need to be walking. Like,
Mary's got stuff to do, you know?
She's got a life to live. She's got to entertain herself. I love it though, and I always love chatting to you about these things because I feel like we always have such a similar opinion on it, which is so funny.
Well, maybe we're the villains of Mansfield Park.
Maybe we are. We always seem to take like, sympathetic approaches to the villainous characters.
Gosh.
I mean, you more than me. You're always like Lucy Steele. I'm there for you.
I mean, to be fair though, good on her. You had limited options and you had a lot of fun. Go for you.
I know, it really blows my mind that like in terms of like books and like in an academic sense, she's meant to be like not very intelligent and like illiterate, but God, is she socially savvy?
Yeah.
Wow, she knows how to like manipulate a situation.
And absolutely, and the thing is, at the end of the day, you're put in this place to make the best situation for yourself, right? She managed it, and Lucy didn't really actually hurt anyone at the end, if you think about it, because who wanted to marry Robert anyway? Like, no one. Like, so it's fine. She got her cash.
That's true, and she knew Eleanor wanted Edward, so, you know, that worked out. I guess the thing that was the bad thing is where she was, like, with the carriage, and she was like, tell them that I'm married to Fanny.
Yeah. Yeah, that was villain energy, fair play. Like, she is obviously not good.
Yeah, but that's the thing, like, Mary doesn't do anything like that, so we're signing that Mary is not a villain,
No.
okay? I'd love for someone to come forward, though, let us know what you think, like, say, you know, if you think Mary is a villain, come tell us why, because we can always, like, readdress it, you know, if something really stands out, we can reconsider, maybe.
Yeah, we'll definitely think about it.
But I honestly had the best time. Do you want to let everybody know where they can find you after the podcast episode?
Sure, yeah. I mean, if you can find me on Instagram at the Book Boy, and that's about it, really. So easy.
Yeah. Absolutely. And also I will tag our previous episode as well, because that was such a fun one to do, and to figure out like who was wealthy and who wasn't, and how like money worked back then, like who could inherit what. And yeah, that was such a great episode to do. I loved researching
So
that
it was
one.
great fun. And I always have such fun talking to you, so love it.
I know, I'm sure you'll be back.
Absolutely. We'll save another villain from the scorn. Maybe Isabella. Let's do it.
Let's do it. We'll save it. Yeah, Isabella redeemed.
I mean, that'll be a tough one. She is awful. But